The air felt heavy that night, as if the world was holding its breath. Noah stood at the edge of the balcony, staring at the flickering city lights below. His heart pounded in his chest, uncertain whether it was the cold air or the weight of the decision ahead. The sound of the distant traffic was drowned by the rush of thoughts that clouded his mind. A whisper echoed in his head, "You're not who you think you are." It wasn't a voice he recognized, but it was undeniable. He was standing at the edge of something life-altering. Could he truly trust what he thought was real? The life he built with Sophie now felt like a fragile illusion. She had promised him forever, but the cracks were beginning to show. Was he falling into the same trap again? Fear gnawed at him, but so did something else. A desperate need to find the truth, no matter how it shattered him. He didn't know if he could walk away, but the thought of staying had never felt so wrong. What if the truth was worse than he imagined? Noah sat at the kitchen table, the morning light streaming in through the window. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh chapter with Sophie. Yet, something felt wrong. His heart still carried the weight of that whispered warning. Sophie's smile, once warm, now felt like an act, a mask she wore to hide something. She was beautiful, as always, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't truly know her anymore. The phone calls at odd hours, the secretive glances, the quiet moments that should have been filled with warmth, but instead echoed with tension. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that the love they shared was real, but his instinct screamed otherwise. Could he keep pretending? And if he couldn't, what would happen to them? Would it all fall apart? The days passed, but the unease didn't fade. Noah had tried to push it aside, to continue on as if everything was fine, but the cracks were there and they were growing. Sophie seemed distant, more preoccupied, and the more he watched her, the more he saw the subtle signs of deception. The way her voice would tremble when she spoke, the way she would glance at her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. And yet, when he confronted her, she denied everything. Her words were smooth, reassuring, but they didn't reach him. Every time she touched him, every time she looked into his eyes, it felt like a lie. Noah didn't want to be suspicious. He didn't want to lose what they had, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. Noah's suspicions had reached a boiling point. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie was hiding something from him. That night, after another quiet dinner, he finally confronted her. "What's going on, Sophie?" he asked, his voice strained but calm. "I know something's not right. You're shutting me out?" Sophie froze, her fork midair. She tried to hide it, but he saw the flash of panic in her eyes. It wasn't the reaction he had expected. "Noah, I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice too high, too defensive. He wasn't buying it. "I'm not stupid," he replied, his tone colder than he intended. Sophie set her fork down, avoiding his gaze. The silence between them thickened, and for the first time in their relationship, Noah felt a wedge forming that he couldn't ignore. Sophie's avoidance stung more than Noah had anticipated. He had hoped she would be honest with him, but the longer she remained silent, the more certain he became that she was hiding something. Later that night, as he lay in bed beside her, his mind raced. Could he truly trust her again? The love they had seemed so real, so pure, but now it felt tainted, poisoned by her lies. He turned over, staring at the ceiling, the darkness consuming him. What if I'm wrong? What if it's all just my imagination? He wondered, but deep down he knew. He couldn't unsee the cracks, and they were only widening. Would he confront her again, or would he walk away, leaving everything behind? Either choice seemed impossible. Noah's heart raced as he paced the alleyway, the night air sharp with tension. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned quickly, breath shallow, only to find the darkness swallowing any sign of life. Sophie had been distant for days, but tonight, something was different. Something was wrong. She'd told him she needed space, but her words rang hollow. The messages, the phone calls, the secrecy, it was all adding up. The growing suspicion gnawed at him like a predator, waiting for its moment to strike. This isn't just paranoia, Noah thought, his thoughts racing. He had followed her, a step behind, hoping to catch a glimpse of something that would make sense of the chaos. But now, as the alley grew colder, so did his resolve. What if he was being led into a trap? No answers, only more questions. Noah leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. The chase had taken him through dark streets, past unfamiliar storefronts, and now into the empty silence of an old, forgotten part of town. The tension in his body began to ease, but the knot in his stomach remained. Sophie's face haunted him, a mask of innocence barely hiding the secrets she kept. His thoughts drifted back to the good times they shared, the love they built. But each memory now felt tainted. He wanted to confront her, demand the truth, but fear held him back. What if he was wrong? What if the lies were only in his head? For a brief moment, he allowed himself to breathe. But the stillness didn't bring comfort. It only deepened the uncertainty. Something was about to shift. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing in. Noah didn't expect the encounter. The figure appeared from the shadows, towering and imposing. His steps were deliberate, echoing through the alley like thunder. The man didn't speak, but his presence was undeniable. Noah's instincts flared. This wasn't just a chance meeting. The man's eyes locked onto Noah's, cold and calculating. A faint smile tugged at his lips, but it was far from reassuring. I don't know who you think you're dealing with, but you're out of your depth? The man's voice finally broke the silence, sending a chill down Noah's spine. The words felt like a threat. There was power in the way the man stood, as if he controlled everything around him. Was this the person Sophie had been hiding? The fear in Noah's gut twisted tighter. He was now part of something much darker than he had ever imagined. The conversation with the stranger left Noah shaken, but he knew he needed answers. That night, he reached out to an old friend, someone who could offer a different perspective. Jake had been like a brother to him, always there when things got tough. Jake's voice was calm on the other end of the line, but Noah could hear the concern. You're in too deep, man, Jake warned. This isn't just about Sophie anymore. The weight of Jake's words hung heavily in the air. For a moment, Noah could feel the fog of confusion lifting, the outlines of a bigger picture beginning to emerge. Jake spoke of things Noah never knew, of people he didn't trust, of a past that had been hidden away. You've got to be careful, Jake continued. This could get ugly. Noah's chest tightened. The man in the alley, Sophie's behavior. It all seemed to be connected. What was she involved in? What had she been keeping from him? The days that followed were filled with questions, with too many pieces not yet fitting together. Noah could feel the weight of his next steps pressing down on him. He had no choice now but to act. He couldn't trust Sophie. He couldn't even trust his own instincts anymore. But there was no turning back. He had already come too far. It was time to confront the truth, whatever it cost. The chase was no longer about following Sophie. It was about uncovering the layers of deception that surrounded him. He could feel the stakes rising, and with them, a resolve he hadn't felt before. This wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about survival. His heart hammered in his chest as he prepared himself to do what he had avoided for so long: take action. He would face whatever came next. Fear could no longer control him. The room was quiet, too quiet. Noah had arrived at Sophie's apartment, hoping for clarity, hoping to find a moment of peace before everything came crashing down. She greeted him with a warm smile, but her eyes didn't match her expression. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Sophie had made dinner, something they hadn't done together in months. and for a second, everything felt almost normal again. But as they ate, Noah noticed it, the odd way Sophie kept glancing at her phone, the slight hesitation in her voice when she spoke about the past. Something was off. He felt it in his bones. His instincts told him that this was just another trap, another lie disguised as a moment of vulnerability. He wanted to confront her then and there, but the words stuck in his throat. What if he was wrong? What if this time everything was fine? The silence between them deepened. He didn't trust her, not anymore. But was it all in his head, or was he just too scared to face the truth? Later that evening, Sophie led Noah to the living room. They sat on the couch, the space between them still palpable. Sophie seemed more at ease now, almost like she was trying to reconnect. But Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden. She talked about their past, about how good things used to be, but Noah noticed the cracks in her words, the pauses that didn't belong. She reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture, but there was an edge to it now, a desperation. Her touch wasn't warm anymore. It was cold, distant. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to let go of the doubt and feel the comfort of her presence again. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. He could hear her breath quicken, her eyes darting away from his when she spoke about her recent travels. "I missed you," she said, but the words didn't sound like they came from the heart. Instead, they felt like a rehearsed line. The warmth in the room didn't match the chill in his chest. And then it hit him. He wasn't the one being lied to. He was the one lying to himself. Noah left Sophie's apartment that night feeling more lost than before. He had tried to ignore the nagging suspicion, but it clung to him like a shadow. He walked down the street, trying to shake the feeling, but his mind kept replaying the conversation. He couldn't make sense of her words anymore, nor the way she had looked at him. Had she been hiding something all along, or had he missed the signs? As he passed by a dimly lit alley, a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was Jake, his old friend. Jake had always been there for him, a shoulder to lean on. But tonight, something was different. Jake's smile was tight, almost forced, and the air around them seemed to grow colder. "You need to hear this, Noah," Jake said, his voice low, almost cautious. "It's not just Sophie you should be worried about." The words hung in the air, heavy with something Noah couldn't place. He felt a chill run down his spine. What was Jake trying to tell him, and why did it feel like the ground was slipping away beneath him? Noah's heart stopped when Jake spoke the words. "I knew this day would come," Jake said, his voice colder now, more distant. "You're too close to it, Noah. You can't see what's happening." Sophie's not the only one keeping secrets. Noah's breath hitched, his thoughts spinning. "What do you mean?" he managed to choke out. Jake glanced around, his eyes darting nervously as if checking for anyone watching. "You're not the only one being played," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to tilt, the air suddenly thick with betrayal. Jake took a step closer, lowering his voice further. "Sophie's not who you think she is. She's involved in something much bigger, something dangerous. You're in way over your head." Noah froze, the words searing through him. His mind raced. Was this the truth? Was Jake telling him everything he needed to know? Before he could ask another question, Jake was gone, disappearing into the shadows. Noah stood there, his chest tightening. The weight of the truth, or what he thought was the truth, began to crush him. It wasn't just Sophie. He had been dragged into something far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The next few days were a blur. Noah couldn't stop thinking about what Jake had said. He'd tried reaching out to Sophie, but she wasn't answering her phone. When he finally confronted her, she seemed different, distant, guarded. It was as if the last thread of connection between them had snapped. "You have to trust me," Sophie pleaded, her voice trembling, but Noah couldn't hear her. All he could think about was Jake's words about the life Sophie had been hiding. The betrayal stung like a fresh wound, but something else burned even deeper. Anger. He had been played, manipulated by someone he thought he could trust. As the silence between them stretched, Noah realized one thing: he couldn't stay. Not anymore. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to stop until he got them. He didn't know what he was walking into, but it was clear that the life he had known was gone. What was the truth? And what did it mean for his future? The silence of the room was deafening. Noah sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window, lost in the confusion that had engulfed his life. The city outside was calm, but within him, chaos raged. Sophie's lies, Jake's warnings, the hidden truths. All these pieces were coming together, but they made no sense. The betrayal had been sharp, a wound that seemed impossible to heal. He tried to breathe, tried to forget the way everything had fallen apart. But the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that this was only the beginning. A flicker of realization struck him. Something about this didn't add up. Sophie had known more than she let on. But what? And who was really pulling the strings? Was it Sophie who had deceived him? Or was there something bigger at play? The answers were just out of reach, yet the weight of the truth pressed against him, suffocating him. This was no longer just about her. It was about something far darker. The memory hit Noah like a sudden wave. He remembered the first time Sophie had smiled at him. The warmth in her eyes, the way everything felt perfect. But that smile had masked something deeper, something he never saw coming. He closed his eyes, replaying the moments before everything changed. He had been blind, so trusting. When Sophie mentioned her business trips, he hadn't asked questions. When she stayed late at work, he believed her. The lies were small at first, innocent even, but over time they had grown, woven into the fabric of their relationship. His mind flashed to that moment in the alley when Jake had warned him. Had he known all along? Was this manipulation part of something bigger than Sophie? The room around him felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. The past and present blurred together, and Noah realized something chilling. Sophie wasn't just keeping secrets. She had been part of something far more dangerous, and he had been nothing but a pawn. Noah's heart raced as he stood before Sophie. This time, there were no words of reassurance, no more pretenses. The air between them was thick with the truth, heavy and suffocating. Sophie had nowhere to hide now. Noah's voice was calm, but his words cut through the silence. "I know what's been going on," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Sophie's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. She didn't have to. Noah could see it in her face. The fear, the guilt, the recognition that everything she had built was crumbling. "You're not the person I thought you were," Noah continued, his voice breaking slightly. Sophie finally spoke, her words slow, measured. "You don't understand, Noah," she said. "I never wanted this. But I didn't have a choice." Her confession hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been living a lie, and now, facing the truth, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Sophie's voice shook as she spoke the truth, and Noah felt every word pierce through him. "I didn't have a choice, Noah. There are people, powerful people. You don't understand what I'm involved in." The confession hit like a storm. Sophie wasn't just hiding small lies. She was part of something much bigger, something that could destroy everything. "You think I'm the enemy?" she asked, her voice softening. "You've been played, Noah. All of you have." Noah's mind reeled as the pieces finally began to fall into place. The game was never about Sophie. It was about power, control, and manipulation on a much larger scale. The truth was both freeing and horrifying. For the first time, Noah realized that the real enemy wasn't Sophie. It wasn't even the people who had used her. It was the system that had made them all pawns. And now, he was caught in the middle. He had been blind, but no longer. The betrayal was personal, yes, but the truth was far greater than his shattered heart. Noah stood in the silence after Sophie's confession, the weight of everything crashing down on him. He had been a fool, lost in his own desire for trust and love. But now, standing in the truth, he felt the shift. He was no longer lost. He knew what he had to do, but the realization didn't come with relief. It came with a quiet sorrow. The man he thought he was had been lost in this web of lies. But the man he needed to be was standing right in front of him, ready to face what was coming. So this was the truth all along. He whispered to himself, the words bitter in his mouth. He had been broken, but now he would rebuild. No longer bound by the chains of deception, he would face the coming storm, no matter the cost. He wasn't running away anymore. This was only the beginning. The air was thick with anticipation, each second stretched by the pounding of Noah's heart. He stood in front of the building, the city lights flickering in the distance, his breath shallow. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the empty street, each one heavier than the last. His fingers twitched at his side, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. A soft gust of wind stirred the stillness, but it wasn't enough to calm the tension in the air. Every instinct screamed that something was about to explode. As he reached the door, he stopped. Just for a moment, the silence felt deafening. He had no idea what awaited inside, but he had no choice now. Sophie, the secrets, the lies. It was all coming to a head. The only thing left was to face it head on. His hand reached for the door, the metal cool under his fingertips. In that single moment, everything paused. The door creaked open, and Noah stepped inside. The room was dim, the only light coming from a few scattered lamps, casting the space in a soft, eerie glow. Sophie stood in the corner, her back to him, but she knew he was there. Her shoulders were tense, and her head turned slightly as if she had been waiting for this moment. Noah took a step forward, his voice low but sharp. "We need to talk." Sophie didn't turn to face him immediately. The silence stretched out between them, thick and suffocating. "You don't understand, Noah," Sophie said, her voice shaky, betraying the calm exterior she was trying to maintain. "You've been chasing shadows." Noah's fists clenched at his sides, the words cutting deeper than he expected. "What are you involved in, Sophie?" he demanded. The tension crackled between them. It was no longer just about truth. It was about survival. Sophie finally turned to face him, and her eyes, those eyes that once held love, were now filled with something else. "You don't want to know," she whispered. But Noah wasn't about to stop now. He had come this far, and the truth was waiting. The confrontation continued, but Noah could feel the weight of something shifting. Sophie's voice had changed, the defensiveness replaced with something darker, more desperate. She took a step forward, her hands trembling. "I never wanted this for you, Noah," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't choose this life. It was forced on me. And now you're in danger too." Noah's heart raced, but he couldn't let the fear show. His hand instinctively reached for her, but she pulled away. "You think I haven't sacrificed enough?" Sophie's voice cracked, and for the first time, Noah saw the cracks in her facade. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Someone had to pay the price, and he couldn't be the one to back down. "I trusted you," he whispered, the words of painful revelation. Sophie's eyes softened for a moment, but then the sound of a car door slamming echoed in the distance. Noah's eyes widened. Someone was coming. But who? It was too late to turn back now. The door slammed open. Figures in dark clothing flooded into the room, their presence like a tidal wave, sweeping away any hope of a peaceful resolution. Noah's breath caught in his throat as he turned to face the intruders. Sophie's eyes widened, panic flickering in her gaze. "It's too late now, Noah," she whispered, her voice full of regret. The man leading the group stepped forward, his face cold, his eyes sharp. "You've been a liability for too long," he said, his tone icy. Sophie tried to move toward Noah, but one of the men grabbed her, holding her back. "No!" Noah shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos unfolding before him. Sophie had been the one to pull him into this world, but it wasn't just her anymore. They were both pawns in a game far beyond their control. The man stepped closer to Noah, his expression unreadable. "This is your final choice," he said, his voice calm, almost disinterested. "Join us or die." Noah's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment where everything would change. Noah stood there, the weight of the choice pressing on him like 1,000 pounds. He looked at Sophie, at the woman who had once been everything to him. But the woman before him wasn't the one he had loved. The cost of this battle had already begun, and he couldn't back down now. With one final decisive action, Noah made his choice. The chaos around him fell silent. Sophie's face was a mask of horror, but Noah could no longer feel the pull of the past. His hands were shaking, his breath ragged, but his heart was clear. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But this was the turning point. He had lost too much to let fear control him. The consequences would come, but for now, Noah had taken the first step toward reclaiming his own future. "This ends tonight," he whispered to himself. The words final. The door was wide open, and Noah was ready to face whatever awaited him on the other side. The world outside was still. The chaos, the noise, the confusion. It all felt distant now. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light over the ruins. Noah stood by the window, watching the city come alive, but he felt distant from it all. His mind replayed the final moments, the choices that had been made. The smoke had cleared, but the damage had been done. Sophie, the lies, everything had unraveled. He had faced the storm, but now all he could do was breathe. The calm felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. He looked down at his hands, worn from the fight, the weight of everything he'd lost pressing on him. The door was still open, but the path forward was uncertain. He had won, but at what cost? The truth was out, but it came with a price. And now he had to face the emptiness left behind. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that battle. Nothing was the same. Noah sat in the quiet of the room, the stillness allowing his mind to wander. The memories came flooding back. Sophie's smile, the quiet moments they shared, and the slow unraveling of trust. He could almost hear her laugh again, but the sound was distant, like it belonged to someone else. Guilt wrapped around his chest, but so did relief. He wasn't sure if he had made the right choice. But he couldn't go back. Life continued, but it would never be the same. The weight of the truth was still heavy on his heart, but it felt like a burden he had to carry. He didn't know if he could ever fully heal, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe. The world outside had started to move again, and so would he. He couldn't undo the past, but he could move forward. Maybe that was enough. Sophie appeared at the door, her face pale and her eyes swollen from tears. She looked at Noah, but neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence was deafening. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they carried all the weight of their broken past. Noah stood, his heart heavy, but there was no anger left, only an understanding of what had been lost. He hadn't expected forgiveness, but here it was. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly, his voice almost breaking. "But it doesn't change what's been broken." Sophie nodded, her lips trembling. "I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to fix us." The words felt hollow, but Noah didn't need them anymore. He had accepted what was, and in that silence, they both understood. The love was gone, but the past would always be part of them. Noah stood in the empty space of the room, the lessons from the past echoing in his mind. The mentor's words came back to him. "The truth is never easy, but it's the only path forward." He had thought he understood that before, but now it felt different. The world had changed, and so had he. The sacrifices had been more than he could have imagined, but it was over now. He had faced the truth, and it had cost him. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was his to walk. He couldn't change the past, but he could shape what came next. The words of the mentor, of the lessons learned, felt like a guide now, a beacon in the dark. The journey had been painful, but it had brought him here, to acceptance, to strength. "I'm ready now," Noah whispered to himself. The past was gone and the future was his to build. Noah took a deep breath, standing alone in the quiet of the moment. The decision had been made, and the weight of it felt lighter now. He had faced the hardest truths, lost, rebuilt, and found a way forward. There would be more challenges ahead, but he wasn't afraid anymore. The pain of the past would always be there, but it no longer defined him. As the wind picked up, carrying the promise of change, Noah's heart felt calm for the first time in a long while. He had chosen to live, to face whatever came with open eyes. And now, for the first time, he was ready to embrace the future. "So this is where I begin again," he whispered, a small but powerful smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It wasn't a victory. It was a new beginning. The world was quiet now. The city moved on, unaware of the storm that had passed through Noah's life. The night had turned to morning, the sun rising slowly, casting a golden light over everything that had been broken. Noah stood by the window, watching the new day unfold, but inside, nothing felt new. His hands rested at his sides, empty, yet full of everything he had lost. The weight of the past pressed against him, but he couldn't go back. He had walked through the fire and emerged, but the scars remained. His thoughts were scattered, about Sophie, about the lies, and the people he had trusted. There was no easy answer, no neat ending. What was lost could never be regained, but what remained was his to keep. He turned away from the window and sighed. What was it all for? Was it worth it? Noah stepped out into the quiet street, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The air was cool, but the warmth of the sun on his face was comforting. It felt like an eternity had passed since everything changed, yet the world hadn't stopped turning. He didn't know where he was going, only that it was time to leave the past behind. The weight of what had happened was still with him, but the world outside was waiting. With each step, he felt the layers of the past begin to fall away, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. He wasn't sure it ever would be, but he was moving forward, and that was enough. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had the strength to walk it. Noah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the letter, the one Sophie had written, but never given to him. He had found it days after everything fell apart, hidden beneath a pile of old books. It had been meant for him, a final message from the woman he once loved. He unfolded the paper slowly, the words faint and trembling on the page. "I never wanted to hurt you," it began. "I was trying to protect you, but I failed." Noah read the words, his heart aching, but he didn't cry. He had cried enough. The letter was a reminder of the life he had once hoped for. Sophie had chosen her path, and now he had to choose his. The words on the paper would always be part of him, but they no longer had the power to define his future. He folded the letter and placed it back in his pocket, the weight of it now lighter. The past was no longer his burden. The days passed and the world around Noah continued to move on, New faces filled the streets, new stories began. Time didn't wait for anyone. He found himself walking the same paths, but they felt different now. The rhythm of life had shifted, and so had he. It wasn't the grand change he had expected, but it was enough. He had found his peace, quiet and slow, but steady. There were moments of sorrow, of doubt, but they were smaller now. He had accepted what had happened and what could never be undone. His steps were lighter, his breath deeper. He wasn't free from the past, but he had learned to carry it. And in the stillness of the city, as the sun set again, Noah felt like he had found a place where he could breathe. Noah stood at the edge of the city, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The light faded slowly, and with it, the last of his old life. The world had shifted, and he had shifted with it. He thought of the things he had lost, but also of the things he had gained: strength, understanding, a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He couldn't say whether the journey had been worth it. Some questions didn't have answers. But as the sky darkened, Noah whispered to himself, "This is where I begin." The future was still unclear, but it was his to shape. And in that silence, he knew he was ready.